So these are a couple of the preliminary drawings I made of Hugo before I drew up the painting. I mean, it was a very valuable process. I mean, the likeness in my mind isn't as good in these drawings, but it really helped me to understand the architecture of his features. The head, Hugo's head in the painting, I did literally sit in that chair looking at the painting, and it took me 2 weeks actually, and working on nothing else, just getting the line right. Because the line that I use are actually these pens here, the Staedtler pens, which have no plasticity to them. So it's a permanent line as soon as you've made it. There's no going back. And I love the commitment of drawing in that way, because something that I'm quite passionate about is the sincerity and the vulnerability and sort of the earnest kind of worry that goes into that initial mark. So it's the sense that you have to absolutely commit in that moment, and you have to be very present on all levels. And it's extremely difficult. And in my practice, drawing portraiture in that style, that once you've made a mark, it's very hard to modify that mark. It doesn't get any harder than that for me in my practice. Initially, when I'd thought about approaching Hugo for a portrait, I'd wanted to make a picture that felt quite different to some of the pictures that I'd made in the past. And I imagined Hugo with his amazing face and his big beard in a very sort of simple pictorial space, just in a black suit. But then after this amazing conversation that we had when we first met, there was just so much rich content there for me. When he left, I kind of sat there and I was like looking at all my notes, and at that point I was like, there's just too much juicy stuff here that felt so relevant to my broader practice, that I did feel, very kind of moved and engaged to interpret that content and try and assemble it within the portrait to some extent. Given that there was so many points of commonality and shared sort of interest, mainly pertaining to an interest in flora and fauna. Again, when he left, I sort of saw so many pictures in my head that I sort of thought maybe there's a way of not just having to condense this into the one picture, and that there's a way of engaging in a slightly broader portrait project. So I also proposed to Hugo that we spend a day playing with some photographic stills, which he was generously up for as well. I mean, always the challenge for me is that there's almost just too much energy there and sort of too many ideas, and how do you find a way of distilling that? Which I think is one of the reasons that I like to go on a very sort of extenuated journey with my paintings, that I almost exhaust myself in the creative possibility in that process. The thought of being able to sort of bang out like maybe 5 images in a day felt very exciting to me, alongside sort of, giving myself 5 months to make a painting as well. It might make the painting sort of, less anxious and less kind of jumbled. It was a way of sort of distilling my vision for the painted portrait also. So what I'm doing here is just very slowly drawing in the vein system on a leaf. So to do this would probably take me about a day, I suppose. And then the ink sort of needs to cure for a good sort of 10 hours before I can come back with the acrylic paint and sort of fill in the leaf, which is also a very time-consuming process. But a process that, once you've surrendered yourself to it, is quite comforting. There's sort of a beginning point and an end point, and it's just about getting through it. And after the anxiety and the stress and that very committing, risky process of drawing up, this is less cerebral and more meditative and rhythmic. One of the most fulfilling moments for me out of this whole process was when Kat, his partner of 30 years, came into the studio, and she just turned the corner and she looked firstly at the painting of Hugo, and she really just audibly sort of gasped, and she just said, "Oh my goodness, it's just so Hugo." And for me, there was just such a sense of relief at that point, that if she could say that, then I really had managed to capture something intimate about him.